ॐ
Not
भद्रं
audible.
कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टवागंसस्तनूभिः वशेम देवहितं यदायुः ॐ शांति शांति शांति। नमस्कार।
नमस्कार, धन्यवाद। Friends, I would like to welcome you all to today's Vimarsh talk by Dr. Ajay Kumar, Defense Secretary, on India's defense sector reforms. I'm most grateful to him for accepting our invitation to interact with us on this very important topic. I'd like to briefly introduce our distinguished speaker. Dr. Ajay Kumar joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1985 and is presently heading the Department of Defense of the Government of India since August 2019. He completed his B.Tech in Electrical Engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. Subsequently completed MS Applied Economics from the University of Minnesota and completed his PhD in Business Administration from Carlson School of Management, University of Minnesota. He was awarded honorary doctorate of philosophy by MIT University in 2019. He began his career with the state government of Kerala. Prior to assuming current appointment, he served in the Ministry of Defense as the Secretary, Department of Defense Production from 2017 to 2019. He was the Director General of National Informatics Center and the Additional Secretary, Department of Electronics and Information Technology. He has served long years in the electronics sector and he has contributed to the growth of electronics sector in India. He was adjudged as the Electronics Leader of the Year for the year 2012 for promotion of electronics industry in the country. He has several publications to his credit in refereed national and international journals, including the ICIS, IEEE, IJEC, HICCS, etc. He was also awarded Distinguished Alumnus Award 2019 of the IIT Kanpur. Friends, recently the RM released a booklet listing recent defense reforms. Many of you may have seen that booklet. The reforms are aimed at making, and I quote, India a global powerhouse in the defense sector, unquote. The booklet lists a number of high visibility reforms that have been undertaken recently by this government. Just to name a few, the appointment of the CDS, the establishment of the Department of Military Affairs, the coming into force of a Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020, which is a revised DAP, aggressive promotion of Make in India, reservation of 101 items for procurement from domestic sources only, the increasing focus on defense exports, relaxation of FDI rules in defense sector, encouragement to innovation through startups, corporatization of Ordnance Factory Board industries, and there are many more important reforms. These are, I think, wonderful positive steps, and they will certainly have an impact on India's defense sector. And these will make the country stronger. But our needs are huge. A complex security environment is developing around us. China is rapidly modernizing its armed forces and introducing new technologies at a rapid pace. It is now self-sufficient in weapon systems. It has massive capabilities in infrastructure construction. It is also emerging as a major space power and cyber power. A China-Pakistan strategic nexus is becoming stronger. And with the changes in Afghanistan, and which is a the security situation there is deteriorating, our security environment will become even more difficult. In our discussions in the BIF and elsewhere, I have noticed that many people, analysts, feel that India should be prepared for a two-front scenario. In addition, we may have to take some responsibilities in the Indo-Pacific region. We need to develop and absorb and increase capabilities in space and cyber domains. We have to be prepared for a hybrid war scenario. The recent Jammu drone attacks have raised serious issues for defense planners. Civil-military integration is essential and needs to be strengthened and improved. Indigenization has to develop at a rapid pace. Our defense diplomacy and collaborations need to be taken to new levels. The availability of adequate resources for defense forces is a perennial question. So there are many questions like this in our minds, and Dr. Ajay Kumar, the Defense Secretary and former Defense Production Secretary, is best placed to give us some insights. And I'm very happy to see that today we have some distinguished participants. General Vij is attending this meeting, and former Defense Secretary Mr. G. Mohan Kumar is also here. In addition, there are former ambassadors and several veterans who are participating in today's meeting. So, Dr. Ajay Kumar, I now request you to kindly take the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir. First of all, thank you very much for having me here to come and share some of the thoughts and some of the work that we are doing. There are a lot of very important issues which we have raised. I honestly don't know whether I will be able to answer all of those, or at least, but can at best share some views. So for the benefit of a structured talk, I thought it would be better to go through a presentation so that some of the work that we are doing can be shared. So with your permission, can I share a presentation?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. So, when we are going to talk about defense reforms, I just want to say this as a opening statement that for possibly, as far as I can see, and I may be a little biased as being part of this, the extent of reforms that are taking place in defense in the last couple of years are possibly, more than what defense has seen in the last 2 decades. This does not mean that we have arrived or we have done what we want to do. In fact, if we were to compare where we want to be, I think we are still a long way to go. But still, the good news is that there have been significant willingness and movement towards the direction of reforming some of the issues which have been pending for a long number of years. I want to cover the work that has happened in defense reforms in these 8 headings. One is modernization of armed forces. Second, promoting Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense. Third is streamlining procurement. Fourth is budget management. Fifth is digital transformation. Sixth is reforming defense R&D. Seventh is strengthening border infrastructure. And eighth is galvanizing strategic thinking. There are other things apart from this, but I thought these were possibly 8 important things that we would cover. I would also like to, say that, that definitely there are issues beyond this, but maybe in question answers, one could discuss those. On the modernization of armed forces, as you have already mentioned, sir, that the formation of CDS and the Department of Military Affairs is a historic change which has we have witnessed last year. This was something which was being deliberated and discussed by large number of think tanks, committees, ministry, government over the last 2 decades. And with this now, for the first time, we are seeing the first steps towards jointness being taken. In certain areas like logistics and training, we already have seen changes and forces coming together and creating common facilities, bringing joint organization to these facilities in some places. But the big thing which everyone looks forward to is the theater command. When are we going to have theater commands? And all I would like to say is that this is something which is actively is being actively considered right now. It's under discussion with various stakeholders within the services, with ministry, and the work for creating the theater commands roadmap is under finalization. The second important thing is, when we talk of modernized armed forces, is our efforts to see how we can move up the technology chain. As we all recognize, you mentioned it, the modern warfare is going to be very different. It is going to be influenced by space, cyber, unmanned aerial vehicles, unmanned underwater vessels, and so on and so forth. The Defense Cyber Agency, which was formed in 2019, is now become significantly active, and efforts to further enhance its capability are very much on the way, and that is happening very well. Defense Space Agency was also set up, and in the last 1.5 years or so, work has been done and some progress has been made, and I think we need to further step up our efforts in that direction. On today, drones are becoming more and more common way of both aggression, surveillance, monitoring, and therefore the need to have greater capability in unmanned aerial vehicles is something that we are looking at seriously. We have acquired certain assets, and more importantly, we are looking to see how this technology we can develop within our country, so that in this new and upcoming technology, we don't have to continuously depend on import. Along with drones, we are also looking to see how the counter drone technologies can be developed in the country, so that we are now able to withstand any onslaught or any attack in this regard. We have seen significant progress by Indian companies in this regard, and recently we had a demonstration of swarms on the Army Day, and that was done by an Indian startup who is today also one of the few companies who are doing good work in military grade swarms. Another area where significant work, for example, replacing the traditional analog-based communication devices, radios, to software-defined radios across the armed forces applications is something which is underway. And also the good news here again is that we have now increasingly seeing reliance on indigenized product in these new technology areas. Except what has been ordered earlier in the past, all new SDRs for all the three forces are being developed indigenously and deployed in the system. Defense, artificial intelligence becoming such an important area of work across all aspects of functioning of all systems, including armed forces. We have now a Defense AI Council headed by Raksha Mantri, which is looking to see the deployment of AI in the armed forces. The broad point I wanted to make is, we are seeing that as we need to change the technology profile of our armed forces, but at the same time, we are also seeing increasing ability of our industry to come up with products in these new technology areas, and we are actively working with them. Next. And with this, I come to the second point, where I think which is regarding Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense. This has been an aspiration I think for at least last 50 years, self-reliance has been in one way or the other being talked about in defense. One of the major thrusts in this regard is been the focus has shifted. We are trying to move the focus from a public sector dominated defense industry to a situation where both public sector and private sector are healthy, competitive, and strong. And we have increasingly been focusing on promoting both these together. The second important part in our efforts to create Atmanirbharta has been promotion of startups in this, especially new technology areas for defense requirements. The IDEX effort, which was launched by Honorable Prime Minister in April 2018, has had shown some wonderful results. And I must say that some of our startups have been able to give results in time frames which are much shorter and at costs which are fraction of the cost which were traditionally used in our R&D. For example, I would like to mention a case of a startup in IIT Delhi who developed 100 megapixel camera which was traditionally being imported from Israel for us. Today, and the total assistance that we have given to that startup is about $1.5 crore. Incidentally, every single piece of this camera that we import from Israel costs more than that. They took about 18 months from the award of the challenge to them to the final development of this camera. I mean, this is the kind of, something which would have normally taken hundreds of crores is today getting in tens of crores, and something which would have taken tens of years is getting done in a year or 2 years. And that is the kind of compression that we are seeing. The second important part of this startup effort is the multiplicity of problems that we are able to simultaneously attack with the startups. Today we have nearly 800 to 900 active high quality startups who are working in defense problems, and this has enabled us today 50 to 60 technology requirements of armed forces are under active development by some of these startups. So I think the fact that some of these startups are actually being have been attracting interest from countries like US and France for tie-ups. For example, the new space technologies which have showcased the swarm, which I mentioned earlier, actually has a tie-up with AFRL, the US Air Force Research Laboratory, for the swarm technologies which they are developing. It's quite heartening to see, and I can mention large number of similar examples which are happening in these startups, which are frontier edge, leading in terms of the technology that we are doing. The second important point in Atmanirbharta is we are today moving away from TOT-based manufacturing. If we look at our profile, even in the past, most of our, we had, our production of defense production used to range between 50-60,000 crores, which was not insignificant considering the total amount of procurement which we used to do at that time, which used to be around 70-80,000 crores. So we were producing about 60, 70, 80% of the requirement. But most of this procurement was actually based on transfer of technology. And one of the biggest banes of this transfer of technology was that there were not enough incentives to actually move up the technology chain as time passed. So just to give an example, when T-72 was there, we took technology and manufactured T-72 in India. And when T-90 came, we manufactured T-90, we again took technology and manufactured T-90 in India. And when I was Secretary Defense Production, we again took the same technology of upgraded T-90 as late as in 2018 or somewhere around that, and took that technology to manufacture the upgraded version of T-90. So the point I was making is the fact that we were making these tanks from 70s and 80s onwards did not lead us to create our own technology. It is only as late as now that we have inducted the latest version of Arjun into our have decided to induct Arjun into our armed forces fleet, that this is there. So our focus is rather than looking at TOT-based manufacturing, we should look at indigenous technologies, or have, even have, if required, if we cannot have indigenous technologies, have international companies come and manufacture from here. The third important part we see a change from the past has been a directed focus on exports. In the past also, export was permissible under certain regimes, under certain restrictions, but this was not a priority item, especially because our production was PSU led, and PSUs were neck deep neck deep with the orders that the government had, the armed forces were giving to them, and export never had the priority. Secondly, our export systems and procedures were fairly cumbersome. One of the important reforms we have done is simplification of our procedures, systems, and policies, introduce things like online portals. Clearances which used to take 6 months to 12 months are today available either on real-time basis or in matter of 3 to 5 days, enabling greater export. And the greatest success, I must mention this very proudly, that we saw growth of defense exports from 1,500 crores in 2016-17 or 17-18 to 11,000 crores in 2018-19. So in a matter of about 4 years, we saw about 8x growth in our exports. Subsequent to COVID, this trend has a little plateaued, but now again we see that we are seeing some of our major platforms being exported, and it is essential. We do recognize that it is essential for our industry to be viable and sustainable, that the export market should be we should have a sizable export market. In fact, if we do also recognize that if we look at the global arms industry, global arms trade, 5 or 6 countries actually constitute a major chunk of export. And if we look at countries like Israel or US, who are one of the bigger arms or France, for Israel, 75% of their total arms production is actually goes for export. For US, more than 60% of their arms production goes for export. So, is export, for us to have a viable defense industry, export has to be an important part of it. The other thing on which work has recently started, and I think we still have to do a lot of work in this regard, is standardization. Over decades, we have been, because of various reasons, and I don't want to spend more time of various reasons, fairly well known, we have large diversity of platforms, which has created difficulties in maintenance, difficulties in management of inventory, difficulties in creating economic viable sizes for indigenization. So promoting greater standardization across platforms is something which we are now trying to address. This has been introduced as a desirable goal, a directive principle for us in the Defense Acquisition Procedure of 2020. And we are now working very closely with Quality Control of India to work out a greater coherent strategy for standardization. We propose to involve, create committees which will have all stakeholders represented, so that we can create suitable standards and thereafter implement those standards across forces. In some of the, we are also trying to give focused attention to some critical gaps in our ability in defense forces. I quickly want to mention 3 areas. One is in terms of aero engines and all kind of engines for that matter. The second is semiconductors and microprocessors, and third is strategic materials. For each of this, all I want to say, without going into detail at this stage, is work is in progress, and we are trying to, we have various efforts that are going to, we recognize that normal industrial development effort which we are doing for other items may not suffice for these critical gaps, because these are all frontier technology, limited to a few countries only, and which have acquired these capabilities over decades of advancement of the technology. So we may need to have special concerted effort for each of this, and work is on for each of this. I could possibly answer some of those maybe at the time of question, but work is on for these critical gap areas in this regard. several policy measures for the first time have been taken which have had salutary effect in clearly conveying government's intent in terms of Atmanirbharta. And the negative list, which is now called the positive indigenization list, is clearly for the first time is stating that these items will be bought from Indian industry, not from Make in India, and will not be imported. 209 items have already been listed out in this, and we will see more items going forward. Corporatization of OFB, so you mentioned it, I do not want to talk more about it. This is another one of those decisions which had been waiting for last at least 2 to 3 decades. So many committees which had gone through and had recommended this, and it has now been possible. The government has had the political will to be able to say that we will. It is good for the health of OFB. It is good for the future of ordnance in the defense manufacturing industry in the country, and our corporatization of OFB is well on its way. Another important statement of intent, as well as is to show where the money is, if one were to say, and the government is today saying that we will earmark a sizable chunk of our budget for domestic industry. And last year it was 58% of the budget. This year it is 64% of the budget on an enhanced budget. So roughly over 25,000 crores more than last year is now available for domestic defense industries. This money is earmarked and cannot be spent for import purposes. And another clear statement of intent, which has for the first time we have done, is we have said now that the startups are producing defense technologies, several of them, like I mentioned earlier, we have earmarked funds, 1,000 crores this year as a test case, to say that we will buy technologies which are produced by startup for defense purposes, which will give further some minor things which I don't want to dwell at great length. Is one is that Make One, which provides assistance for R&D to industry, had been a non-starter, and we are now decided therefore to delegate these powers down to the commanders and the services, so that they are able, somehow it was a feeling was that it was getting stuck in the government because of the systems and procedures, and a lot of projects could be taken up at the service levels, and we have delegated those powers with cabinet approval. Again, Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020 has been, lot of it has been in the public media space. I do not want to again dwell too much on it. I can take it up. And we are also aligning the DPM and DFPDS along with the broad perspective of Atmanirbhar Bharat, and opening up the whole sector, both to the private sector and the private industry. One of the banes of our defense preparedness has been long time delays which it takes to procure defense items. We did a study, and the average time taken to conclude a contract in 2014-15 used to be nearly 6 years. This is the average time. And a lot of work has happened to speed this up, but till last year, the average time has reduced from about 5.7 years to about 3.8 years. That is roughly about 4 years is still the time taken for, on average, for a capital contract to be concluded. We have now taken upon ourselves the decision at the Raksha Mantri's DAC level that time should be reduced from 3.8 years to 2 years. And to do this, several changes in our working style of functioning have taken place. One of the important steps here has been digitization of all procedures in the acquisition process, which will both bring in greater transparency and speed. We have we are trying to reduce the time for trial and testing, and combining development trials with user trials is one of the steps which has been provided for in the DAP in this direction. Another step on which we are working today, and the guidelines will shortly be released in this regard, they are work in progress, is greater use of software and simulation-based testing. Testing using digital twins is something which is practiced widely in more advanced countries. It has been used in some areas in India also, especially in aerospace and space sector. We want to use greater digital twin based testing, which will reduce both time and cost of testing in our acquisition process. Another area where we have done, what we have done is we have provided for the first time, one of the reasons why procurement used to get held up was because of the very ambitious SQRs that were sometimes created with the desire to have the best equipment. One of the ways that has been we have tried to address this problem is by creating a mechanism within the DAP where we provide the desirable SQRs, and if someone achieves more than that, if instead of firing up to 400 kilometers, someone goes 500 kilometers, and if that's a desirable parameter, then 6% of the cost can be given for such enhanced features. Leasing of equipment for short-term needs and for quicker needs is something which has been provided. And of course, delegation of powers has also been given for emergent needs, especially in today's context of what happens on the northern border. Let me talk about the next important issue, which has been one of the major important areas of work for us. And here on the slide, as we show, there has been significant growth of our budget in the last, and this figure relates from 2013-14 to 2019-20, and I'll say why this is only up to 2019-20. So between 2013-14 to 2019-20, there was over 60% growth in defense budget. But as is seen from this table, a lot of this increase was absorbed by increases in pension and salary, and capital expenditure, while it grew on an average at a rate of only 6 to 7% per year. This trend has changed in the last 2 years. In 2021, we received nearly 2021, we received 10% growth as against 6% growth over the previous years, which was a big increase from 6% to 10%. And over and above that, again, we got 20,000 crores additional in the RE of 2021. This, although it says 21-22, it is 2021. So which means in 2021, we got significant increase. And going further, in 21-22, that is the current financial year as we are going, the B of 21-22 was 23, the capital procurement budget has gone up 23.5%. So in the last 2 years, for the first time, we have reversed this trend of slow capital expenditure or lower capital expenditure growth vis-a-vis salary and pension budget. In the last 2 years, our growth in capital budget, capital procurement budget, which is basically the modernization budget for the armed forces, has been much more than the salary budget. The second important thing that we have been focusing is, and this is something which is overall improving the financial management of the defense budget, is digitization of our financial management systems. Two major projects, there are several projects, but two major projects which I want to talk about. One is complete digitization of pension processes, because pensions are one of the biggest growth areas for us, and it is important that we have transparency, efficiency, and accuracy in our pension systems. And the SPARSH, as it is called, is the e-pension system is now operational. It was started last year in October. For MOD Civil, Air Force onboarded in February, and Navy in April, and Army is onboarding in this coming month. Our experience on SPARSH has been significantly superior. What used to take sanction of pension, which used to take about 6 to 12 months, the time for sanction is got reduced to 2 to 5 days. The average sanction time is reduced to 3 days, and all of those who are part of government system would be quite surprised that we can actually do this in 3 days, and this is what it's available on a dashboard for everyone to see. The second thing is it has introduced features which were again it's not even available in rest of the government, where the pensioner himself verifies all his details, all his service details, etc. before his pension is sanctioned. He is able to download his pension slips, etc. So much more greater accuracy. I stress on accuracy because the biggest area of complaints and grievances that we receive in this ministry is from pensioners who are aggrieved on their pension calculations, etc. It's by far, it's nearly 2/3 of the complaints that we receive relate to pensions. And I think this is a big step which will help redress that problem. And the second is introduction. We are the only ministry in Government of India which happens to spend more than what we get in the budget allotment. And this more than what we spend goes to the extent of 10,000 crores or to that order. It is very surprising in that in such a regimented system wherein government doesn't allow even a single paisa being spent beyond the budget allocation, we manage to spend several thousand crores over the budget. But that's something, and we have several audit objections, etc., which have come in the past on this count. We are now trying to change that, and a PFMS system, which is akin to the PFMS system that is there in the rest of government, is presently under development, and we hope that in the current year we will be able to complete that. A huge area of work which I must say that is very dear to me has been digitization of large number of segments of Defense Ministry. Armed Forces have their own large plans where they are transforming digitally. For the rest of the Ministry of Defense, which also impacts overall functioning of the Defense Forces, we have taken large number of digital transformation projects. There are at least 25 to 30 different projects in different wings of Defense Ministry and its various other organizations that are underway. In the interest of time, I do not wish to go through all of them, but these slides here will show that practically there is hardly any wing under which is not taken up digitization of one form or other. I'm especially proud to mention about 2 or 3 projects. One of them is that the whole Defense is the largest land holder in the country among government departments. We have about 18 lakh acres of land, and today all of this land is on a GIS-based platform, easily available for any land management issue, which has significantly improved its land management system. This other thing is that we have now done is that practically all agencies, so let me not dwell too much on it because the e-commerce portal which has been started for the canteen store department, this has been something which all users of canteen store department hopefully would have discovered. Again, it has resulted in much greater, this is presently for AFD items only, and we are going to start for the non-AFD items in due course. Work is in progress for that. But for the AFD items, the ease of doing business has significantly improved. Several trips to the bank or to the offices or to the canteens is not necessary now, and the time for getting an order from today is reduced to what I was told was to 2 to 3 days now, as against 15-20 days it used to take in the past. Cantonment services, all cantonments in the country, all 62 of them, all their services are today processed online. None of these services are today allowed to be done in a manual order. And so like I said, several other organizations have also gone online. Closely related to our work on Atmanirbhar Bharat is reforming defense R&D, and here, while further advancing the kind of work that has been done by DRDO, and there is much greater speed and momentum to DRDO's work, effort has also been there to encourage industry and startups. I have already talked about industry. Make2 has made significant progress. Nearly 50 projects under Make2, which is funded by the industry, are today already underway, and some of them are now at stages of procurement. And under Make, the beauty of Make 2 is these projects are funded by the industry. The development is funded by the industry on the assurance that if they successfully develop the product, the procurement of a certain quantity will be given on a transparent tendering basis. So with an assurance of an order being there, industry has come forward, and while we started for Make 2 initially with small size projects, for 50 or 100 crores. Today, we have industry offers which show for thousands of products and procurements worth thousands of crores. Industry is willing to develop the product. It may entail initial development costs running into 50 to 100 crores or more, and industry is willing to take up this development by themselves. Startups, I have already said, I don't want to go. And the latest addition to this has been the effort to get the services also to actively participate in the R&D process. So today, our R&D canvas is both industries, startups, services, DRDO, and of course academia. Some of the one of the another areas of focus has been, especially DRDO has been working on this, is to change the age profile of its of the scientists who work in its labs, and it is in this direction. They have 5 labs they have started where all scientists are young scientists of the age of 35 or below, especially in new technology areas like AI, cognitive sensor technologies, quantum technologies, etc. The second big change is, as is the overall thrust to get greater industry participation in R&D today, DRDO is outsourcing large number of products. They have identified, they came out with the first list of 108 products, which they have told industry that they have made those technologies available to the industry, thrown it open. They have created a policy where the patent pool and the IPR is made available to industry free of cost, and industry is now free to use them, to produce them, as well as to upgrade these products to the next generation technologies. Similarly, in their own development products, invariably now they are working with a technology development partner from the very beginning. That is, when they take up the development, they don't wait for the technology to mature before they go and identify a production partner. They identify a development and production partner who develops the technology with DRDO and then later on produces it, thereby increasing enhancement. I think defense R&D reforms are something which are an essential part of our larger Atmanirbharta step, and a lot of work is happening in this direction. Border infrastructure, strengthening of border infrastructure is something which is a focus area from what we have done. And I would like to just show, without spending too much time, I want to make just 2 or 3 points here at this stage. And one is that there is greater thrust to the work which BRO does on the border, as is indicated in this slide. The second point I wanted to mention at this stage is that apart from building roads, bridges, tunnels, etc., our focus has been that our passes should be opened as early as possible. And this is a table of how different passes this year were opened at least a month earlier. This has both strategically very important that our forces could move through these passes. Our airlift effort could thereby be reduced to that extent. And of course, it also was a big boost to the local population, the local economy as well. So with conscious strategy, while these tables show that things which used to be closed, several of these passes which were closed in the past, this year, 6 passes were not at all closed. This was possible, one, of course, with dedicated effort from the team from BRO, but I also want to mention, and also the new equipment that has been provided to BRO, and also recognition that keeping passes open for longer time is something which itself is both strategically and economically important. We did a rough calculation what it means to keep a pass open for one extra day. And based on the calculations or estimations that have been done, for each day of keeping a pass open, it will save armed forces 7 crore rupees. And therefore, if about 30 days or so, if these passes were kept open, we were able to save about 210 crores in the process. Another area, Defense Ministry has been, largely been in a place which is difficult to get permissions, access, etc. One of the reform processes which we have been focusing is to enhance ease of doing businesses. From the procurement perspective, DAP has done a lot of things in that step. And also, I want to talk of some of the other areas where work has been done to enhance ease of doing business and ease of living. An important area has been the opening up of the geospatial data policy. Earlier, no one in the country could collect any geospatial data without the permission of MOD. And this was, even in areas which had nothing to do with defense, it required clearance from MOD to be able to do this. February this year, new geospatial data policy has come, where Defense Ministry has actively supported the idea of more liberal, best in practice kind of geospatial data policy, where only where defense has concerns, we have put restrictions in form of attributes. So large chunks of area in country where defense has nothing to do to data collection, and therefore geospatial database decision making is enabled for the economy. We have started increasing use of GEM in our procurement. This has brought both speed and timely payment. And I emphasize on timely payment because in GEM we have started a system where the payment to the supplier is made based on the budgetary allotment and not necessarily based on the allocation for that given month for that purpose. So this has greatly enhanced the payment speed for what is received to the vendors on GEM. And we have been, while we are still small compared to our total size of procurement, we have been one of the fastest growing ministries or departments who have been in terms of the growth at which we are using the GEM portal. E-commerce in CSD I have already mentioned, eChavni I have already mentioned. And another big area of ease of doing business and ease of living is Cantonment Act Revision. And just to mention some of the steps that have already been taken, for example, Cantonment Act, the trade license in Cantonment Act has been simplified and today is available across on real-time basis on the portal without having to visit anyone or in many cases unnecessary inspections have been done away with. Lastly, I want to talk about one of the areas where we have been trying to create greater strategic thinking, get ideas from outside and not only within what goes on within the four walls of South Block as far as MOD policy, thinking, reforms, etc. is concerned. We are today working with a large number of think tanks across various domains of MOD think policy, and we are informed and guided by their output in terms of how some of these actions can be taken place. So this is broadly which I thought I will cover as part of my opening this thing, and I thought maybe. So thank you very much once again, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ajay, for that comprehensive presentation. And you have given us a very interesting insight into the thinking of the Ministry of Defense and also the steps taken in the direction of reforming our defense sector. It is quite clear that winds of change are blowing because many of us who have been dealing with national security would recognize in your list many of these things have been talked about for a long time, but it's great that the present government has shown the political will to take on some of these reforms. One instance, for instance, as you also mentioned, the corporatization of the OFB. That's a suggestion which has been there for a very long time. The need to strengthen the BRO and equip it with the new equipment has also been felt for a very long time. And of course, the simplification of the procedures, digitization of the processes, etc. These have been talked about for a long time. Uh, and I think the one big change which I noticed, which has happened in the last 2, 3 years, is this, from what you said, is the encouragement to the startups. And you mentioned almost 1,000 startups, I think, are being encouraged. And many of them have already produced good materials and technologies and so on and so forth. I was just wondering, when will we produce a unicorn amongst